So now, 8 years later, just how powerful is AQIM in Ivory Coast, and what impact will this trial have? To discuss, our terrorism expert Wassim Nasser joins me here in the studio. First of all, Wassim, tell us about the context of this attack in 2016 in Ivory Coast. What was happening then at the time?
Well, actually, it happened at a very particular moment. We are a year after a break in the Murabitun jihadi factions, where the spokesperson joined the Islamic State in October 2015, and we are a year prior of the creation of JNIM, Jama'at Nusra Islam Muslimin, who was created in April 2017. So it was the first attack of this kind in Ivory Coast. Of course, there was 19 people who were killed, among them 9 from Ivory Coast, 4 Frenchmen, 1 Lebanese, 1 German, 1 Macedonian, and 1 Malian, and 1 unaccounted nationality victim. So it is important because we saw for the first time who was known to be Mukhtar al-Mukhtar going back to the ranks of al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb that you mentioned, and pushing further south. This was his aim, to push further south. This was what took him away from Akim, and what brought him finally to Akim is to push further south and to hit in Grand Bassam. It happened after an attack in the Hotel Splendid in January 2016, and there was also another attack in 2017 in Ouagadougou by the same group that was never claimed, and since 2017 no such attacks on civilians happened in this region.
So where does that leave the group today? I'm talking about al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
Well, actually, you have to understand that it's all linked between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Ivory Coast. And you talked about 18 suspects. We have actually only 4 of them which are present. One of the 18 is actually held in Bamako, and he was the master planner of the attack. He's still held in Canada, in Bamako. He was almost released in 2020 in exchange of French hostage and of Malian politicians. The Americans prevented it because he was also accused of planning the attack of the Splendid that we talked about in 2016. But among those who were freed in October 2020 in exchange of the French hostage and the Malian politician, there was jihadi figures from the region of Sikasso. We see here on the map, so on the border with Ivory Coast, and we are witnessing since last summer a re-implantation of jihadi camps, of al-Qaeda camps, all over the border between Burkina Faso, Mali, Ivory Coast, and Mali. The last important encounter between jihadis and Ivory Coast government forces was in June 2020, and since they avoid each other, but we know that al-Qaeda jihads are recruiting among Ivory Coast populations in the north, and we know that the army there is trying to keep them away from acting inside Ivory Coast.
All right, thanks for your analysis. Wassim Nasser, our terrorism expert, for us there.